Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Nadia Ninsvik, Vice President at Qtric, and I'd like to welcome you all to the third session of our Smart Rail Innovation Series on battery electric bus integration with rail station charging equipment. Today we're going to start off with just some Zoom housekeeping items. We do actually have over 100 registrants for this session, which is quite exciting. And we hope that everyone is comfortable with Zoom. And I'd like to welcome you to keep your video on, but to please keep muted while the presentation is taking place. Additionally, you'll be able to see the participants on the call, enable a live transcript, and utilize the chat feature. Melissa, if you could just move forward, skip through slides 2, 3, and move to the video. So we're going to kick it off with an intro to the Smart Rail Innovation Program at Qtric with a short video to help demonstrate our intended focus. So Melissa, over to you. And it looks like, I'm not sure if the sound is on, but Great, thanks, Melissa. So that hopefully the music kind of woke everyone up. That's great. Just a little kickoff to some of the innovations that Qtric is looking at around rail. So if we can move to the next slide, thank you. I will be calling the meeting to order. It is 1:02, so we are a little bit ahead of schedule. We do have a jam-packed session ahead. And then I will just move on to the roll call. As I mentioned, we do have a number of registrants and participants, based on the registrations received. If you don't see your name here, you can go ahead and add that to the chat. We did try to update this in real time, and you'll see we have some excellent attendance across a number of different stakeholder categories: government, transit agencies, transit operators, utilities, industry, academia, NPOs, associations, and our consulting services that we work with as well, and maybe some new. So I'll just quickly run through the list, calling out the names: City of Hamilton, Infrastructure Canada, Government of the Northwest Territories, Ministry of Transportation, Metrolinx, Coast Mountain Bus, Metropolitan Transportation Authority, LA Metro, Los Angeles in the US, Transport Canada, Natural Resources Canada, City of Hamilton, Electro Utilities, EXO, London Hydro. And then in our industry category, we have Volvo, New Flyer, Siemens, Hitachi Energy, ABB. And then in the next category, we have University of Alberta, McMaster University, Rail Canada Association, Europe's Joint Rail Undertaking, Transport Action Canada, the Austrian Institute of Technology, Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, Concordia University, the Canadian Urban Transit Association, Simon Fraser University, Ontario Tech University. And then finally, our consulting services, we see again at Fleming, Plan Group, AECOM, Deloitte, CMAP, Bojilek, Weidmuller, SolarX, TELUS Transit Technologies, IBI Group, Morrison Hirschfield, Jensen Hughes, Left Turn, Right Turn, Signature Renewables, Skillsonic, Air Products, Railcom, Vontas, PNR Railworks, Electron Networks Canada, Connectrix, WGD Consulting, and finally Parsons. So again, if your name isn't listed here, please just do send it in a chat and we will be sure to add it. Something that we do here for the sake of Qtric governance is it would be great if we could actually have a member designate on the line to motion to approve the agenda that was pre-disseminated prior to this session. You can go ahead, someone as a member designate, you know who you are. If you could just add in the chat and motion that you approve the agenda. Let's just see here. Looking at the chat, is there anyone? Let's see. Amal, are you on the line? Could you just motion? No, he's not there. Stephanie? Oh, there we go. Terrence and Lee, thank you very much. Okay, so moving on. So really, this is the welcome, and we're also very happy to have you with us today. You know, this is to further our smart rail innovation strategy. And as you know, we've identified charging infrastructure for battery electric as an important element to connect bus operations to rail infrastructure. The intention of this discussion is going to be to further solidify some of the dialogue to advance in a targeted way, not only achievements of, to achieve Canadian zero emission goals, but also how we can further optimize transit operations at rail stations and between rail stations and bus transfers. Just moving on to the next slide. So some of you may be familiar with this slide, but I just wanted to take a moment to outline some of the key components at a high level that we at QTRIC and our partners have done to support decarbonization and how we're thinking through a rail innovation roadmap for Canada. We consulted over 200 organizations in the rail sector to identify major technology themes at play in rail innovation, like in alternative propulsion, energy efficiency, operational optimization, and alternative materials. We developed a report in 2020 called Rail Innovation in Canada that identified the top 10 feasible technology themes important to building Canada's future passenger and freight mobility system. Just so you all know, it is actually available on our website and free for our members in the portal for download. In 2021, under the Government of Canada, ZETF was announced to prioritize the transportation sector and climate change priorities. And where many of you know, QTRIC was ultimately selected as the Zero Emission Transit National Planning Service by the government. The Smart Rail Technology Conference we had in 2021 brought together industry experts, business leaders, political representatives, and decision makers, many of who are on the line today, on these critical topics defining Canada's rail future. It was attended by over 170 participants. And actually, I'll make a correction. It wasn't the 2021, it was the 2022 conference, excuse me. And so our focus now is to further develop the Smart Rail Innovation Program, and we're looking to have that support and the continuation of bringing together these important stakeholders in consultation and considerations to further our Smart Rail Technology Innovation Program. Next slide, please. So today we're going to be looking at the trends around bus rail integration. We've been a pioneer in leading transit electrification projects, and we aim to provide continued leadership and consortium expertise to advance battery electric bus integration with rail station charging equipment. I just wanted to emphasize again that the work we do at QTRIC is highly collaborative, and it brings to the table the OEMs, industry partners, transit agencies, utility and power corporations, government, and the research organizations to help advance forward in achieving a low carbon future. Next slide, please. And why this particular innovation? Well, apart from it contributing to Canadian zero emission goals, we are wanting to work with our partners to help in the optimization of transit operations overall and create a more holistic transit electrification system. We're clear that the installation of e-bus infrastructure at rail spaces plays and will continue to play a critical role in the success of the overall net zero approach. Next slide, please. This I'll just run through very quickly. For those of you who attended our most recent conference in November, there was some discussion held around electrifying rail hubs and the planning for battery electric bus charging. You'll see some of the highlighted topics where our presenters, Jensen Hughes and Parsons, talked about opportunities, successes, challenges, and the pathway forward. In very short order, we will be making available these recordings as well as our other sessions from the 2022 conference. Next slide. So here we just have from our last session, some of the highlights around that we've identified as it relates to hydrogen rail through our focus group session. So again, we had 2 questions in our last session, and where we highlighted here the key points that really included around, the need for further government support, studies, and the adoptions of lessons learned from other countries, along with some other points that were brought out through those focus sessions. The next question on the next slide, please. Look to really further explore what Qtric's role should be in hydrogen technology for rail. And where the focus groups that we had here identified the importance of further advocacy efforts by Qtric, leadership, coordination of studies, and the demonstration projects that are very important, as well as increasing collaboration and consultative activities. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Maria, who's the project manager, to continue with the presentation. Maria?
Thank you, Nadia. Good afternoon, everybody. This section is to show conceptual components and relations between electric buses and rail. So we can see here the transit-oriented demand programs as a external circle there. Why? Because this is a tool that all major Canadian cities have for planning. And on the transportation side, we can have that as an opportunity to integrate this component that is modernization of our transportation, including e-chargers within the rail stations. So you can see here urban areas and the transportation interaction that is between that and the rail infrastructure, and the concept of e-chargers around the stations or in the infrastructure. So these are options that we have right now. Next slide, please. For this slide, I wanted to show you opportunities that we have right now in Canada. So here we are, we can see major cities in Canada that already started with the electrification journey. So on the top, you can see Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, Ottawa, and Montreal. On the left side, you can see what type of transit those cities have right now. And as you can see, the highlighted cells in orange are opportunities. So why? Because those cities, they have ongoing projects. They started the electrification of the fleets. They have all components aligned for us to start this innovation. So next slide, please. This slide is showing you the same major cities on the top, and on the left you can see what cities started with pilot projects in regards of electrification of the fleet, of bus fleet, and also pilot projects in regards of transit and rail. So the highlighted in orange is the specific project that Qtric led in 2019, and it was a successful project with some of our members. They are pioneers in the field. They have the experience, international experience. They have ABB, Siemens, New Flyer, and Nova Bus. Next slide, please. On these sections, I'm going to talk about the Zero Emission Transit Fund. Is available from the government to help transit agencies to convert diesel fleets to electric power. And the fund, as Nadia mentioned, it was announced in 2021, is covered the 80% of the cost of the planning cost and 30% of the capital projects. Next slide, please. I wanted to highlight here the importance. We have a section here that is also applicable for infrastructure. So we are talking about infrastructure when we are mentioning e-chargers. Next slide, please. Here you can see the timeline of the Zero Emission Transit Fund. As you can see, the announcement, it was in 2021, but that didn't stop. So the funding has been increased. And as an example, it was an incentive for transit agencies in March, this past March 2022, when the funding invested $10 million when Kutrik was selected as a Zero Emission National Planning Service. Next slide, please. Another important program about electrification is the ZEVIP, Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program. Is from Natural Resources Canada. And because we have at the beginning of 2023, we expect to have more news about this program. Next slide, please. I'm going to highlight other projects and other strategies from provinces and different projects that are ongoing. Next slide, please. MTO has a strategy, started a strategy in 2021 with the 4 pillars to help transit agencies and to convert the power, the diesel power. The focus is in charger infrastructure, EV supply, information and awareness, and life cycle cost. So they are providing information for all our interested in the field of electrical power for vehicles. Next slide, please. Other strategies are coming from Metrolinx. So you can see here the Transit Procurement Initiative. And we are expecting, again, news about this, this strategy. And another strategy is from MTO, developing a toolkit supporting connections between Ontario technology companies and municipalities and transit system operators. Next slide, please. Now in this section, we are going to see projects started and projects ongoing in the electrification field for vehicles, for buses specifically. So Ontario started the Zero Emission Bus Program in 2021 with a test of double-decker buses. Why this is important is because it's the future. So cities are going to be densified. We know that that is the natural progression of planning. And this is another option that we have to electrify vehicles. Next slide, please. Another initiative is the TTC vehicle program. So we had the opportunity to have our presence in a TTC yard for these vehicles, these buses, when we planned that in our conference in November. So we learned a lot about what is the status of this program, how TTC is progressing, and what is the expectation. So you can see here more details about cost, number of vehicles, and what is the plan until the summary plan, like until the 2036. Next slide, please. The Go Rail expansion is about rail. Of course, it was announced last year to start a modernization program for the rail, and it's a long-term project. Is until 2047, and they are the scope of work is to modernize the rail in Toronto, and vehicle suppliers are going to be from Alstom, and responsible agency is going to be Metrolinx. Next slide, please. Again, as opportunities, I wanted to list major projects in passenger rail. So we have the GO expansion. I already mentioned that in Toronto. In Calgary, the Green Line LRT. In Edmonton, the LRT extension right now ongoing, and in Vancouver, the Surrey Langley Sky Train. In Ottawa, we have the LRT Stage 2. And in Montreal, the Riso Express Metropolitan is starting for passenger rail. Next slide, please. This slide is to show you how has been developed all this news every month about electrification. So that never stops. It's a good indication that we are taking a good path to continue with this innovation, and from all provinces. So we have news from Quebec, Ontario, Vancouver, all major cities, because this is an important goal for Canada. Next slide, please. On this slide, I wanted to show you a very good tool that Kutrick has been used as a modeling tool for transit. So that tool can be applicable to this innovation. So how we can apply that? The tool is going to be able to assess existing electrified bus fleets and to help transit agencies and rail operators to decide what is the suitable location, what is the type of charging to be around the rail station. So there are a lot of benefits that we can get from RUDI, that is the modeling tool from Kutrick. Next slide.
Thanks, Maria. That's very good. And so now, just to move forward, what we're looking at is the section of the presentation where we have some industry presentations coming up by Hitachi Energy, New Flyer, and Siemens, who are going to be presenting on some of the interesting bus charging and integration aspects that support bus rail integration. Really looking forward to hear about those opportunities and some projects that will be outlined. Just a reminder to the presenters, I may pop in to provide a time check based on allotting enough time for our breakout sessions. So just with that, I'll introduce our first speaker and also a Qtrek industry member, Daniel Simone from Hitachi. Daniel, take it away.
Thank you very much, Nadia, and thank you, Maria, for the insight and the presentation. So maybe just switching to the presentation, please. First slide. And the next one. Good. So I'll just share a little bit of who we are, Hitachi Energy, and then I will jump a little bit on the technology here and how can we integrate EV charging infrastructure as part of a railway station, especially electric trains operation. So Hitachi Energy, as you probably know, we are a global company, and our focus is really on the energy play. As our name, we are providing solutions in electrical solutions from the grid to the plug, we claim. And so like from transformers, some grid automation technology, high voltage transmission, we are very strong on the power utility world, from the transmission and the generation up to the distribution level. We are serving customers, for on the power utility, but also a lot on the industrial. And since 2013 and even before on the transportation in railway operation, power traction equipment and solutions. The growth in the EV, is pretty intense these days since 2013. Where we deployed our first flash charging technology in Europe. We see a lot of needs now for electrification on fleets. So maybe on the next slide to share a little bit what is the trend and also to echo what Maria was saying about the projects. What we see around the corner is like this convergence between energy and mobility. In the past, a big energy consumer for transportation, for electric energy were trains, and see now with the deployment of electrification of buses, and in the future, and also what we see on the trucks, which will be even a bigger wave of energy requirements. We are evaluating like in 2030 that a needs of 500 terawatt hour of capacity. So it's a lot of issue here to manage. It's also a lot of issue on the power side. How do you deliver that to the sites? And the fact that we, until today, we have been really on few projects, pilots, 10 to 20 EV and buses and going up. And we see much more now these days. And in the future, we are talking about multi-megawatts per site, and with a quantity of buses in the range of hundreds per site. So basically, this is a new challenge for the power utility. It's a new challenge for everybody. And also, how do you accommodate that on existing site? Next slide, please. So in Hitachi Energy, because we come from the power utility world, we look at this issue of load and with a different angle. We understand that the more you will scale up, if you start to take a traditional approach, which is like individual charging devices that you will stack and install in your garage or in your depot, you may end up with a lot of problems, like on the distribution voltage. Maybe it's not anymore a low voltage distribution network. You have to now to start to look at connecting to the grid to benefit from a lower current and also better tariff. There is also all an aspect of reliability, maintainability. How do you integrate without, creating issues to the grid? What will be your cost, not only on the capital side, but on the operating side? The demand pricing is another big issue. You know, how do you manage this peak of power? So we look at a different approach. Instead of going to an individual charging devices, we look at a centralized solution. And basically what we do is that we have and you see that on the grid emotion fleet, that's the name of our solution. We do it's similar to railway. So that's why it's interesting today to discuss about railway stations and everything. But this is coming from our railway technology, where we do a rectification from a transformer and creating a DC bus, and you have DC chargers to charge your vehicles. So it could be buses or trucks or cars. The big advantage here is that you can connect directly either to the low voltage or to the medium voltage side, which is important. And we'll come back to that just after for the railway stations and everything. But the big advantage, of course, is the room. Next slide, please. Is the size of the equipment, but also is to eliminating the wiring, and also to have like a centralized solution for multi-megawatts that you can scale up in the future. Now, to be on the subject of today, we are talking about railway stations. So here, what's interesting with this kind of technology is that we can integrate and connect to an AC or DC, because the fact that we have a rectification unit. To the left side, you can see that we could connect to a railway medium or distribution voltage, so directly, so without the needs of having another transformer in the front, so which saves a lot of cost and space. A big advantage of that is that you can, on the other side, you can also consider to connect to a DC connections, like your third rail or the DC catenary of a metro system, assuming that the network can take it. In terms of load, what's interesting with this concept is that the trains usually they don't operate at full load or capacity during the night. So you can think about charging during the night at certain station. You can also use the opportunity charging, which is hundreds of kilowatts. But all of this will work if you have good software capability, because you could even think about, and probably you can go to the next slide, please. Assuming you connect all of this, so these are the elements, maybe we will go quickly on that, but these are the elements of our solution, which is very modular, starting from the transformer, rectifier, the cabinets with the modules, and then the pedestal. It could be pantograph also. I didn't put that on the slide for a question of time. Next slide, please. So we deliver that either indoor, outdoor, which is important because on railway station, if you have a greenfield project, it's quite interesting. You could set up this to install in the railway station to save a lot of money. Otherwise, if it's already like a brownfield project, you will have integrated solution that you can install outside. That's the reason why we have these two different offerings. Next slide, please.
Daniel, hi, it's Nadia. If you could just, you've got another like 30 seconds. If you could just try to wrap up, that'd be great.
Yeah, maybe. So just the other ones are just pictures. You will go fast. So this slide is important. Is how do you integrate with the software solution? So this is very important, especially on railway. If you start to try to use the power that is already the capacity of your railway station, then you have some energy management solution that is important to apply, and you can do peak shaving. You can do even connecting to the SCADA of the railway. You can make sure that you can use the power when there is not a train starting, for example, at the station. So these are the kind of tools that are very important. And then for the next slide, if you can just switch, it will be one word for each of them. This is an example in London where we have an integrated a system installed for buses. The next one, please. Here is an example in Sweden, where it's an integrated solution that we install inside a building. And the next one. And here it's to show, how we deliver an example of an integrated solution delivered in Berlin, where it's already with the concrete-based installation outside. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Danielle, thank you. That was amazing. Great presentation. Sorry to rush you at the end.
Understood.
But yeah,
No
wonderful. Thank you so much. So up next, we actually have one of our founding members, New Flyer, Patrick Jones, going to be speaking about his presentation. Patrick, please take it away.
All right, thanks, Nadia. My name is Pat Jones. I'm the manager of infrastructure solutions for New Flyer. And many of you know New Flyer, but you may not know the infrastructure group. And we were specifically launched in January of 2019 to address infrastructure issues related to battery electric buses. And now we're getting into hydrogen. There was a little bit of talk about hydrogen in the beginning of the discussion from Nadia and Maria. But I'm going to be focusing on battery electric buses as a topic for today. So next slide, please. So as you probably know, New Flyer has a full suite of vehicles available, both from the Alexander Dennis double-decker to the New Flyer transit bus and MCI coaches, as well as the ARBOC smaller 30-foot, 25-foot, and cutaway vehicles. Next slide. So we're a global leader. We've been building electric buses for, I believe it's 70 plus years, maybe it's 90 plus. No, I think it's 70 plus with catenary connected vehicles. But we support 155,000 buses and coaches around the world. We're building 9,000 or so per year and employ 8,000 people across 9 countries. And we're located in Winnipeg as our main headquarters. Next slide. So I won't go into the details here, but these are the 3 main elements on the transit side and the MCI coach, both electrified. And then the third bus on the right is our hydrogen vehicle. Again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but we're into multiple generations of these vehicles now. The Excelsior base on the transit bus has been around for over 12 years and has been a workhorse for us in all modes, but particularly with now the electric. And then with the MCI vehicles, the over-the-road coaches, those have been a little bit newer to the market, but over the past couple of years, they've shown to be strong and in demand from the using population. Next slide. So zero emission bus benefits, probably don't have to tout the benefits here, but saving CO2 emissions on a mile basis, eliminating greenhouse gases, and in particular inner city particulate matter and other pollutions. That's the basic genesis of the electrification movement. And we're very excited to be part of that transition. Next slide. Again, on the dollars side of things, and these are US dollars. I'm sorry, they're not in Canadian dollars, but you can do the math. Well, depending on what the exchange rate is today, which is constantly in flux, but there's a lot of money to be saved here over the lifespan of a bus, whether it's your lifespan is 12 years or 14, or even in our home city, Winnipeg, up to 20. There's money to be saved with electric buses and moving in that direction. Next slide. So I wanted to highlight 3 examples of actual real world projects that are either complete or in the works, where we've been involved with a New Flyer side of infrastructure solutions of putting in chargers at rail stations. They're a great complement. They're a fantastic complement to rail. Whether it's getting to the last mile issue or that connection between major lines. This example for you is Chatsworth Station at LA Metro. It's an intermodal passenger station, started off with rail. It's got Amtrak intercity rail, Metrolink commuter rail. The Amtrak serves in each direction 4 trips per day. The Metrolink has 7 per day in each direction, as well as 1 on the weekend. But most recently, the LA Metro added, and with the assistance of New Flyer Infrastructure Solutions, 2 battery electric bus chargers in 2021. And you can see on the picture on the right-hand side, that area circled in yellow, we have the charging equipment, which is highlighted down in the center picture on a little pad there in the middle of that green space. And then the bus charging on the right-hand side, there's two pantographs there. You can see them on the picture on the left. They're serving 60-foot vehicles, and those buses charge on the right, and then they loop around, and they're dropping off all their passengers on the left-hand side there on the platform adjacent to the tracks. And if you jump to the next slide, I have a few pictures just highlighting that. You can see how these all come together. And one thing to focus on is it's back to back. It's very convenient for passengers to move between rail and bus at many of these stations and with the station designs. So that picture on the upper left is an Amtrak vehicle at night. Very beautiful, sleek, moving through the nighttime air. On the right-hand side is the bus platform side of it, which is directly on the other side of where the train is. You've got all your typical amenities, the fare collection and the signage and cover from the sun in this case, and rain in the most past month out in LA. And then the overview of the whole thing of that racetrack where they're charging on the left and then swinging around and boarding and alighting on the right. Next slide.
Just a quick note, we have about 30 seconds left.
Okay, I'll be quick.
Okay.
Trinity Metro, this one is in development. We're building it right now. It should be open. The charger should be open. It's in that box in yellow, right in that center photo. But you can see on the photo on the left, that orange vehicle that's sitting there, that's where the charging location will be. If you want to jump to the next slide, again, you can see the location of passenger boarding between bus and rail is very convenient, one right across from the other. And jump to the next slide. Here's a hometown favorite, being that we're talking about Canada, TransLink 22nd Street Station. This charger was installed in 2019 as part of the QTRIC effort of doing interoperability across the system. I won't get into the details here. You can read them yourself. Next slide. There again, some rail pictures. Next slide. Just some quick takeaways that you can read at your leisure. But the bottom line is that electric buses and rail stations absolutely have a synergy to them that we're seeing pop up more and more. And that picture on the right there is the TransLink station and a bus charging on an ABB charger. I'll end there.
Thanks, Pat. Love the last slide. I mean, tied it all together very well. I also love the QTRIC plug, so thank you for that. Just moving on to our next presenter. Thanks again, Pat. We're moving on to Siemens, and it'll be Ray Little from Siemens presenting. Ray, take it away.
Hey, thanks. You can jump right into the slide deck. A special shout out to QTRIC for having Siemens here to talk about integrating electric infrastructure at rail stations. We're going to be slightly more abstract than our previous presenters. Nice job, guys. Next slide, please. We've built an agenda to help us through this slide deck today. Admittedly, there's a lot of slides in this deck, and we're going to go through them pretty quickly. I'm not going to read the slides, but I'm using these agenda items to change topics. I am going to tell the story about what's on the slide, and these agenda items build to the point that Siemens would like to make today, which is the possibility of considering rail stations as electric transportation hubs. Next slide, please. By way of introduction, I represent Siemens Canada e-mobility division. We've got lots of great statistics here on this slide, but the main message here is that Siemens has built organizational infrastructure over the past 12 years in order to support the e-mobility sector. And our tagline is plug the grid. It's this message that Siemens has a portfolio of products and services enabling fleet operators to obtain electricity from the grid and deliver it to the vehicle. Next slide, please. Great. So we actually visited some sites. Next slide, please. And just acknowledging that Siemens also has a division called Mobility. That division actually manufactures trains in all of these categories listed here on the right-hand side, 1 through 5. But also acknowledging that electric infrastructure is not necessarily a one-size-fits-all given each of the different rail station types that we experience. And we intuitively know that the dynamics of an urban subway train station are inherently different than, say, a Metrolinx GO station in a relatively suburban environment. Next slide, please. And so a lot going on in this slide. We actually visited some rail stations, and we'd like to point out a few characteristics of these rail stations. I'm going to start with the photos on the top row. It's the Meadowvale train station in Mississauga. And you can see in the top left photo, there's actually some technology deployed at that station, some next stop information. And the middle photo on the top is depicting a car park, the idea of park and ride. And of course, in the background of that center top photo, we can see light industrial, some office space back there, an office community. And of course, the top right photo is showing the tracks themselves and the electricity intersecting with that rail station, and maybe a little bit of electricity usage at that rail station, and yet another car park on the other side of those tracks. And at the Mount Pleasant station in Brampton, the photos on the bottom row of this slide depict a little bit of technology there on the left, bottom left, where there's a fare card reader, the transit station itself in the photo beside it. But in the photo, the third photo from the left is depicting the other side of the rail station where there's actually a community there. There's businesses along the bottom floor, barber shops and restaurants. There's residences on the top floor. In addition to that, there's a library and even a skating rink right around the corner there. Next slide, please. Of course, we can see the bus charger there. And so what does Siemens mean by digitalization? Next slide. At the moment, the electricity industry is set up in a way where we have these very large power factories, things like nuclear power stations, hydro dams. And the key characteristic of these power factories is that they push electricity out from the factory to the electricity consumer in one direction. It's referenced as centralized. Next slide, please. So while at the same time we're going through this massive transformation in the transportation sector, the electricity industry too is going through a massive transformation. And it's evidenced by these solar fields that I'm sure most of you have seen in your travels, along with wind farms. And so these smaller sources of electricity production are popping up around the electricity grid in relatively odd locations and in relatively speaking small quantities. And this is leading to a thing the electricity industry is calling decentralization or distributed energy services. And the key characteristic here is that electrons can actually flow in two directions, from the power source and to the power source. Next slide, please. And so what exactly are we meaning about an electric transformation hub? Next slide, thanks. So all of these vehicles are showing up at train stations. Personal EV drivers, the proliferation of electric vehicles, our car parks are going to be filled with EVs requiring charging. School buses are in these communities. Of course, transit, local delivery vehicles delivering parcels to those businesses that we saw around the train stations. Not sure about Class 8s in this category, but the point we're making is that there's an opportunity for our industry to create a new revenue stream through community charging at these rail stations. Similarly, there's an opportunity for the electricity industry to share the electricity load or to shift the electricity load in ways that have become traditional in other markets. Next slide, please. And so Siemens is advocating that there's this Uber model of electricity, this idea that me as an EV driver could show up add a car park and share the electricity that's in the battery of my car with the electricity grid, or vice versa. I could take electricity from the grid if and so when they needed it. And as a savvy consumer, I would like to participate in the electricity market. And by way of example, today, the Ontario government is on the street for 2,500 megawatt hours of battery storage. Think about all the batteries sitting in these vehicles around these car parks. In addition to that, delivery companies might want to make a reservation at a charger in order to charge their vehicle at off times. One transit authority shows up at a vehicle charger installed by another transit authority. How do we handle that billing? And so this concept of Uber electricity is beginning to develop. Next slide, please. Of course, this can't happen without a little work. Next slide. And so Siemens is proposing that there are tools available to us to enable the planning and forecasting of electricity in these areas. We fully acknowledge that particularly in Canada, there's regulatory work that needs to be done to facilitate participation in the electricity market. And of course, we need to sort out who owns the assets and the real estate. Siemens suggests that digitalization or software is part of this solution set. And we think that there's space in the industry for QTRIC potentially to lead a study and a pilot test on community transportation hubs. With that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. And that's the end of the presentation.
Great, thank you very much. That was so informative. Love the final slide as well around the enabling of the strategy and through digitalization. And yes, that's what we're here to talk about, whether, you know, we are going to be moving forward to do this as QTRIC and, you know, that leadership role and how important it is. Now I'm going to turn to my colleague, Maria. Maria, if you'd like to take it away for the next step.
Thank you, Nadia. So, yeah, in this section, we are going to have 4 breakout rooms. The breakout rooms are with transit agencies, government representatives, the industry, consulting services, academia, associations, and nonprofit organizations. All registrants are going to be allocated in 4 rooms, and we are going to formulate 2 questions. So next slide, please. So the first question is the objective, of course, before I continue with this, is to have your opinion. So these 2 questions are really important for us. The first question is, what role does the government of Canada have to support the successful bus rail system integration in larger cities, Canadian cities such as Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary, Ottawa, and Montreal, as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation? So the question number 2, next slide, please. Is going to be the role of QTRIC in this specific strategy to integrate e-charging equipment into rail infrastructure. So the question is, QTRIC is a leading organization in technology projects such as electric buses and fuel cell electric buses deployments in Canada, so which clearly have linkages to bus rail stations integration. So what role is critical for QTRIC to play for the success of future demonstration projects? So now you are going to see the different, your name in a different focus group, and we are going to start with this dynamic. So thank you everyone for this very interesting time discussing really important topics for us and also for the future. So we have a very, very good list now about how is going to be our next steps, and how to integrate other items in our agenda. So thank you for that. So we are going to continue with the feedback from moderators. So next slide, please. Yeah, so each moderator is going to provide a summary, is going to highlight some opinions that the group had during the discussion. So let's start with the room 1. Nadia?
Yes, thank you, Maria. I'm just getting organized here. So my room was with government transit agencies, had some industry as well, and utilities. And so for the first question around kind of the, what other things governments should be doing, some of the comments came back as, throwing full policy mix at it, around regulations, the requirements, more studies, supports, incentives, other financial structured approach to supporting these types of projects, innovative financing schemes. And another comment that I found quite interesting was, being nimble, right? So making sure, we do need to kind of travel on a path that's kind of streamlined in order to hit some of these goals. So I thought that was very good. Another comment around that as well was around RD&D needs. So research and development needs to be active, right? We have to try and test some of the deployments, obviously, prior to deploying. Clear requirements, identifying what those clear requirements are. That was another comment. A lot of financing and support comments were coming back. And we did have one comment from a government person that was saying that, and true enough, that there has been a lot of money put into research with NRC and other departments on charging infrastructure optimization and regulatory measures. And these are all very obvious, obviously important. So I think it's this idea of just kind of continuing on the momentum. And so that was basically, Maria, the kind of big comments that we heard during that session. And I will move on, I guess. We'll go to the second question because we'll just do this going across. So the other question was around really what QTRIC's role could be into furthering this. And, some of the things that we're doing and some of the things that we could be doing. And we got some nice comments as well as, keep doing what we're doing here at QTRIC, bringing together that pan-Canadian framework and that consortium model. We had some other comments and continuing, of course, and amping up, integrating other agencies, gathering some lessons learned. A couple of comments that were important as well were really learning from other models, looking at and providing more examples of through the European perspective. They're further along in their electrification processes and bringing those learnings to North America. And then we also had some specific conversations as well as to some focus around safety. So that was an interesting conversation, prevention by design, for those interested in the safety aspect, as well as some discussion around hardware versus software and trying to streamline how the issues and challenges or overcoming the issues and challenges that are out there today. So those were a few of the comments, Maria, from Working Group 1.
Thank you very much, Nadia. Let's go to room number 2.
Okay, thanks, Maria. Okay, so room number 2, we were the consulting group, and we had a really good discussion. So to start us off with our first question, what can government do? So from the group, there's a few main points that I highlighted. The first of which is that government could look at creating national standards for safety. So safety for batteries, also storage systems, because at the present, there isn't much coordination on that front. So creating a national standard could be very helpful. Also looking into creating a standard for charging units. We talked about suburban areas versus high density living and there being a lack of charging units available there. So potential solutions could be looking at government creating standards for cell coverage. That was brought forward as an example. Also, that legislation should be introduced, looking at the rail sector specifically, as the rail sector is not as innovative with some of the comments, so legislation could really help that. Also providing monetary incentives for innovative projects as well. And there was one comment about creating a potential, looking at creating a cost and benefits transit infrastructure model to see what locations in Canada could really benefit from more transit, knowing that there's a lack in some rural areas. So I thought that was pretty interesting. For the second question, so for QTRIC's role, some of the comments were that we should continue to look at demonstration projects that aren't afraid to be disruptive. So continuing to look into autonomous vehicles, also potentially looking into urban mobility for first mile and last mile solutions. There were also comments about looking into facilitation trials, continuing to do our advocacy work at the national level, looking into more joint procurement models to get projects funded. Those were some common themes in our discussion. And a final note was that QTRIC could do more research and looking into transportation hubs as well. So those were the main points of our discussion. And yeah, overall, it was really nice to speak to everyone. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Dominique. Very interesting. Let's go to room 3, Jessica.
Yes, so I was in room 3 with a grouping from academia as well as nonprofit organizations. A lot of the comments that were shared definitely dovetailed with some of the themes that have come out of groups 1 and 2. And in terms of question 1, we heard a lot about government being able to support storage for electric chargers and facilitate that space, as well as support for enhancing the electrical system and being able to integrate public transportation planning to a higher degree, as well as new funding agreements at the federal level that could support the additional charging infrastructure that would be required. And interestingly, one person in our group mentioned that something the government could do would be to not politicize this bus rail integration, which I thought was really interesting. In terms of the second question and QTRIC's role, very much similar answers to the first 2 groups. They felt that there was a role for QTRIC in terms of project planning, research, and development, certainly around knowledge sharing. And they also mentioned potential for a pilot program that could be helpful, as well as developing prototypes and repeating certainly some of the models that have been implemented in past QTRIC research as well. And also, notably, they felt that there was a strong need for QTRIC to serve as a neutral third party in some of the conversations around bus rail integration, which was notable as well.
Thank you, Jessica. Very interesting. That is good. So QTRIC is seen like a bridge between organizations, academia, so government. That is really good. Excellent. Let's go to room 4.
Yes, Vince Guglielmo. We were the industry and utilities group. A lot of what we covered has already been covered by the others, so I'll just cover the incremental ones. There's a mention of, we had a lot of funding during COVID in large scale. If we could just get a portion of that in a reasonable way, it would be just that much better and make significant differences. So we'd like more funding is the question, is the comment. And we'd like to continue to look at integrating electric charging solutions with infrastructure as projects are rolled out, because oftentimes they're not considered, and they would be of great value for sharing with the communities where those stations or locations serve. From a federal funding perspective, QTRIC valued and is needed as a neutral agency or consortium to stick handle and navigate all these interoperability items. And what was pointed out was the integration. There should be better integration between federal funding and the provincial funding as it relates to the utilities, which tend to be provincially controlled. So there needs to be more alignment between the federal initiatives and the provincial agencies. And the scope of projects, the provincial agencies are moving forward, and the scope of projects, if they were tightened in terms of the parameters, there might be more traction to integrate between province and federal. We need to focus on electricity storage. We have electricity generated, and oftentimes it gets sent to the United States for free when it could be used here. So if we had storage or more emphasis on storage, we could utilize that for our own benefits. In terms of the second question on QTRIC's role, QTRIC is needed, highly valued. The consortium model works. They did suggest that we believe more advocacy is required. Not that we don't do advocacy today, but more intensive advocacy, again, with all governments to make sure things are streamlined. They would like to see a more innovative funding model for projects, and the interoperability project that occurred before was a great benchmark, and they'd like to call it the electric transportation hub project, which would also include multiple transit agencies to collaborate and cooperate on advancing that. And I think that's it.
Excellent, Vince. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting, different options, different views. So I think we can continue. Just for information, all this feedback that we receive today, so we are going to provide a summary soon with the highlighted items that we believe they are contributing with our work and the government actions. So next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to remind what is the program schedule at this point. So the next session is going to cover the theme of passenger data analysis and rail to bus transit scheduling integration. That is going to happen in April 10th. Then we are going to have autonomous bus crossing with autonomous rail system feasibility analysis. We are going to explore subtopics there interesting on that field, and that is going to happen in May the 3rd. After that, on July the 10th, we are going to have the theme high frequency rail versus high-speed rail policy focus in Canada. So from our last conference, we identified a high level of interest for this topic. And next is going to be the cybersecurity in rail operations in Canada. And that session is going to be in August the 1st. Next slide, please. So I'm going to bring up our report, the QTRIC Canadian CEP database report. It was published, and the announcement, it was in our conference in November. So the Canadian database is the second report in that field that is showing data from different agencies. A very interesting report. This is free for our members, and you can get that report checking our website. Next slide, please. I'm going to adjourn. First of all, thank you very much for your time attending this session. Very informative, very interesting. Thank you to our presenters as well. And I'd like to ask for a motion to end this meeting. It can be from one of our members or no members. So let's say
Martin, yes.
Oh, thank you very much. And I am asking for the second one.
Second.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, so thank you very much for this excellent session, and have a good day.